The story of Jonah is one of the most recognizable accounts in the Bible. A prophet is called by God, refuses his assignment, and is swallowed by a great fish before reluctantly completing his mission. But beneath the surface of this narrative lies a sophisticated and challenging story. Many modern scholars consider the Book of Jonah a theological masterpiece, carefully crafted to confront assumptions about divine mercy, human pride, and prophetic identity. Other scholars, however, read the story in a more literal sense, emphasizing Jonah's experience as a historical account that affirms God's power to intervene for the purpose of salvation. Composed in a world shaped by ancient mythologies, Babylonian, Canaanite, Egyptian, and Greek, the Book of Jonah engages familiar literary patterns only to subvert them. It presents a prophet who resists obedience, a God who extends compassion to violent enemies, and a conclusion that offers no resolution, only a question. Rather than portraying the prophet as a moral exemplar, the text reverses expectations. The pagan sailors show reverence, the brutal Assyrian Empire repents, and the prophet of Israel becomes the sole figure who opposes the mercy of God. In recent years, prophetic movements have re-emerged across the global church, most visibly within networks associated with the New Apostolic Reformation. These movements are often marked by nationalistic rhetoric, public declarations of divine judgment, and self-appointed apostles and prophets who claim to speak on behalf of God to governments, nations, and culture at large. Their messaging frequently draws hard lines between the righteous remnant and the so-called compromised church, casting themselves as the sole carriers of divine truth. Repentance is often framed in terms of political allegiance, cultural conformity, or spiritual warfare against external forces. What is striking in this landscape is how closely these voices mirror the very attitudes Jonah embodied: disdain for outsiders, resistance to mercy, and a desire for divine vengeance rather than redemption. As these voices grow louder, the question arises: if the Book of Jonah was written to critique a certain kind of prophet, how close have we come to becoming the very thing it was warning against? Among the prophetic books of the Hebrew Bible, Jonah stands apart. While other prophets deliver lengthy oracles, pronounce judgment, or call for covenant renewal, the Book of Jonah offers something entirely different. Its central figure resists his commission, speaks only a single sentence of prophecy, and becomes deeply troubled, not by the sins of others, but by the mercy of God. This inversion is deliberate. From the outset, the narrative presents Jonah not as a model of obedience, but as a study in contradiction. He is a prophet who flees from God, seeks to avoid confrontation with his audience, and ultimately becomes indignant when his mission succeeds. In contrast to figures like Isaiah or Jeremiah, Jonah does not intercede for the people. He offers no lament. He issues no plea for repentance. The text uses this unusual structure to raise a theological question. What happens when the servant of God becomes an obstacle to grace? The story does not unfold as a straightforward prophetic account. Instead, it is shaped by irony, reversal, and critique. To fully understand its message, one must recognize that Jonah is not positioned as a spiritual guide, but as a narrative lens through which the audience is invited to examine their own assumptions. In the mythologies of the ancient Near East, the sea represented more than a body of water. It was a symbol of chaos, danger, and the unknown. In Babylonian literature, the sea goddess Tiamat embodies primordial disorder, and her defeat by the god Marduk marks the triumph of order over chaos. This cosmological framework, in which divine power is established through violent conquest of the deep, shaped the worldview of the surrounding cultures. Against this backdrop, the Book of Jonah offers a striking contrast. Jonah is cast into the sea, but no conflict unfolds. There is no divine struggle, no hero overcoming a monster. Instead, the sea immediately responds to God's command, and the great fish that swallows Jonah is not an adversary, but an instrument of preservation. The narrative draws on imagery familiar to the ancient world, but subverts its expectations. The descent into the deep, where ancient myths locate cosmic battle, becomes, in Jonah, a place of quiet submission and unexpected grace. The chaos of the sea is not defeated, it is tamed. It does not need to be overpowered because it is already subject to the will of the Creator. In this story, the threat lies not in the depths, but within the prophet himself. In Canaanite mythology, divine authority is earned through combat. The storm god Baal becomes king by defeating Yam, the chaotic sea deity. This victory secures Baal's place among the gods, and his power is demonstrated through thunder, wind, and seasonal rains. These stories present divine rule as something that must be won by force, order emerging only after conflict. The Book of Jonah engages with this worldview but offers a radically different portrayal of divine power. When Yahweh sends a storm upon the sea, there is no struggle. The wind and waves obey without resistance. There is no need for combat or display. The elements are not rivals to be conquered. They are instruments at the Creator's disposal. Even more striking is the purpose of the storm. It is not directed against pagan cities or foreign nations. It is aimed at the prophet of Israel, Jonah himself. The storm functions not as an expression of judgment against outsiders, but as a form of divine correction for one who should have known better. In contrast to the mythological gods of the region, who assert dominance through spectacle, the God of Jonah exercises authority through quiet command, and directs that authority not to destroy, but to restore. In the epic traditions of the Greek world, sea voyages served as metaphors for heroic transformation. Homer's Odyssey portrays Odysseus as a man tested by storms, monsters, and divine opposition, each obstacle revealing his wit, endurance, and growth. Through hardship at sea, the hero is refined. He survives not by surrender, but through strategy and personal strength. Jonah's story offers a stark counter-narrative. He does not embark on a journey of transformation. He is not driven by destiny, nor does he seek wisdom. When the storm comes, he does not struggle, he sleeps. When questioned, he offers no solution beyond being thrown into the sea. Unlike Odysseus, Jonah is not shaped by the voyage. He simply avoids responsibility at every turn. Even more revealing is the behavior of those around him. The pagan sailors, often portrayed as peripheral or unimportant in ancient narratives, display reverence, compassion, and a willingness to cry out to a foreign deity. They attempt to spare Jonah, fear God, and offer sacrifice once the storm subsides. In contrast to the Greek heroic model, the Book of Jonah presents a prophet who is neither courageous nor exemplary. It challenges the idea that greatness comes through personal strength and endurance. Instead, it points toward a different kind of deliverance, one grounded not in heroism, but in grace. In ancient Egyptian belief, the journey after death was complex and ordered. The deceased entered the underworld, or duat, where they faced a series of trials, gates, and divine judges. Success required sacred knowledge, ritual purity, and moral integrity. Only those who passed the tests, whose hearts were not heavy with wrongdoing, could achieve peace in the afterlife. The soul's survival depended on preparation, worthiness, and alignment with cosmic order. Jonah's descent into the depths presents a deliberate contrast. When he is cast into the sea, there is no preparation, no ritual, and no demonstration of worth. He sinks not as a tested soul, but as one who has fled his commission and offered no repentance. His prayer from within the fish, poetic in form, acknowledges his condition, but lacks the contrition found in other prophetic texts. Still, he is preserved. Where the Egyptian worldview emphasized merit and precision, the Book of Jonah highlights unmerited mercy. The prophet survives not because he has earned deliverance, but because God chooses to extend it. The sea becomes a space not of judgment, but of transformation. In contrast to cultures that viewed the journey into death as a test to be passed, Jonah's experience reveals a theological assertion. Salvation comes by divine initiative, not human achievement. In the ancient world, the Assyrian Empire was synonymous with violence and domination. Its kings inscribed their conquests in stone, boasting of mass executions, impalements, and the systematic destruction of cities. Nineveh, the empire's capital, symbolized imperial cruelty and spiritual corruption. For an Israelite audience, it would have been the last place one expected to witness repentance. Yet in the Book of Jonah, Nineveh responds to the prophet's minimal proclamation with extraordinary humility. The text offers no dramatic sermon, only a short warning of impending destruction. And still, the response is immediate and total. From the king to the animals, the city fasts, dons sackcloth, and cries out to God for mercy. It is meant to shock the reader. The brutal enemy becomes the moral example. The king, who would be considered semi-divine in his own culture, strips off his robes and lowers himself before a foreign god. In doing so, the narrative reverses expectations. Those presumed to be far from God draw near, while his own messenger withdraws. The repentance of Nineveh is not merely unexpected, it serves as a critique of the prophet's assumptions and a challenge to the audiences as well. Ancient myths often place the source of danger in the natural world, particularly the sea. In Mesopotamian, Canaanite, and Greek traditions, the sea was inhabited by chaos beasts, hostile gods, and destructive forces that had to be subdued or outwitted. Survival in those stories depended on a hero's strength, divine favor, or knowledge of the god's secrets. In the Book of Jonah, this pattern is reversed. The sea, while threatening, obeys. The storm is not chaotic, but controlled. The fish does not consume, but preserves. Every element of creation responds in perfect harmony with God's will, except the prophet. From the beginning of the narrative to its close, Jonah is the only figure who resists. The sailors show reverence. The fish fulfills its role. The city of Nineveh repents. Jonah alone remains defiant. He flees from God's presence, resents the outcome of his mission, and ultimately expresses more concern for a withered plant than for the lives of an entire city. The real conflict in the story is not between God and creation, or between good and evil, but between God and his own servant. In a world filled with ancient fears of monstrous forces in the deep, the Book of Jonah quietly suggests that the greatest threat may come not from the sea, but from the heart of the one who refuses to forgive. After sparing the repentant city of Nineveh, God asks Jonah, "Should I not have compassion on that great city?" The prophet offers no reply. The silence is intentional. It invites the reader to reflect not on the sins of Nineveh, but on the condition of Jonah's heart, and perhaps on their own. This open-ended conclusion transforms the narrative from a historical episode into a theological mirror. The question is not whether God will extend mercy to the undeserving. That has already been answered. The deeper concern is whether God's people are willing to accept it when he does. In recent years, many claiming prophetic authority have focused their energies on national judgment, moral decline, and spiritual warfare. Calls for repentance often center on cultural enemies. Messages from God are framed in terms of power, exposure, and retribution. In such a climate, Jonah's story becomes unexpectedly relevant. Could it be that many prophetic voices today sound less like the God who is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love, and more like Jonah before the fish? Voices that call down judgment on cities, demand national repentance on political terms, and proclaim divine mandates without mercy may not be delivering a prophetic message at all. Instead, they may be echoing the posture the Book of Jonah was written to confront, a posture rooted in entitlement, outrage, and fear of God's compassion being extended to the wrong people.